So I'll call the meeting to order. Moving down to item number 2, will you kindly stand and join with me as we honor our country, our state, pledge allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas
Texas
flag.
flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, do we have any public comments? Anyone signed up for public comments? All right. Item number 4, consider an act, request for adjustments. Are there any adjustments at all, Mike? Nothing needed? All right, moving right on. Consent agenda. Does any member want any items removed from the consent agenda? All right, do I have a motion and a second to accept and approve the consent agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay, moving on to item number 12, approve the resolution authorizes the middle of the 2024 water smart application. I think that was in your packet. Good.
Also, join in on the AWP program.
So moved.
I have a second.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Is that in the consent agenda too?
Well, we're on 12.
12 and 13, I think, are part of the consent. It just.
Okay.
Yeah, the page thing.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. It's kind of cold this morning, so.
Good experience. This is an annual exercise. 2005, doesn't cost anything.
As I recall on this one, we have a state requirement to get it in, and we haven't had a chance to review it yet. So we normally make a motion subject to, and are we going to have a presentation by the auditor today?
Yes.
Are we going to have a presentation by the auditor?
Yes. And you're talking about the audit?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Said that's number 14.
Thank you.
That's where we're on.
Okay, item number 14, please.
I'm John Knox, for those who haven't met yet, but,
Welcome.
completed the audit. It went very smoothly. Accounting department's doing a great job. Makes our job easier, and, I can go through the numbers if you like, or the major sections if anybody's interested. Otherwise, just here to ask for approval. We'll, get it finalized and, issued to the TTQ mid-February, pending any changes that the attorney or Eric or anybody may have, but they'll be minor, I hope.
I didn't have any questions. Anybody have any questions on it? I'm assuming everybody reviewed it. Okay, thank you, John. Appreciate it. Do I have a motion and a second to accept the 2022, 2023 audit report to draft?
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, item 15, received the report regarding the proposed amendment to the Montgomery Central Precinct District 2024 budget. I think ours was what, $167.88. Is that right? I think that's what was in the package.
167,984. So, but there has been a change in Senate Bill 2, starting this year. For the Board of Directors for MCAD, you have a list in here for the ones, we just went through that election.
Right.
So you have that list in here of the ones that will be seated.
No, we'll be seated on, we'll be seated on the 18th of January at the board, the January board meeting. So we've been elected, but not officially sworn in and seated for the term 24 and 25.
We do have a change in the Senate bill. It's now going to be a 9-member board instead of 5. So we're gonna have to go through this again. And it's actually it's like your normal election. And right now, there was nothing in the budget because there was nothing set in stone yet. So now, like your normal election that you will have, and it's gonna be another 350,000 possibly for the May election. So that's gonna be an increase. If it doesn't take the full 350 at the last quarter of your payment in December, you'll get a refund for whatever the balance is. The county judge has all authority over all of this. They will do the election, and we contract with the county like we do on your election. So, and that's the change. They did have a meeting with Senator Creighton.
Well, if I could take a step back, Jeannie's point about a 9-member board, election will be in May, and the additional 3 elected from the public will be seated in July, and that will constitute a 9-member board. That's a change that came up in Senate Bill 2. Senate Bill 2 also legislated that the appraisal districts all around the state have to execute the election. So the appraisal districts have a choice of either doing it themselves like we used to do here as the MUD, and we know how complicated that has gotten in time. And Brian's always reminded us that it becomes more difficult, and a recommendation was to move to the county election. We did that. We have an estimated contract price of $350,000 to run it in May versus doing it in November, which is probably $500,000. So when we prepared the budget for all our taxing units back in June, none of this was concrete in Senate Bill 2. If this was known, it would have been in the original budget. By the time we got to September, we approved the original budget, but we still didn't have some final things in Senate Bill 2. So then we sent out a supplement, and that's what all the taxing units have received is a supplement. But what we wanted to do is increase transparency to say, look, if the estimate is less than $350,000, we're going to give a credit back to each taxing unit in their fourth quarter payment, and not keep that as a reserve. The other thing we had a meeting with Senator Creighton yesterday at George's Coffee Club, and Walt was there and Eric was there. And we asked the question, what about an unfunded mandate? Because the mandate in Senate Bill 2 was for the appraisal districts to run an election. It's nice to get mandated to take action, but where's the compensation? I learned 2 important things. One, apparently the governor's office has funds set aside for elections. We don't know what that means, but we're going to investigate and see if funding is available. How do you get it? And would it apply for this election? And then we'll return that as a credit towards our taxing units. If that's not available, I think Senator Creighton was a little surprised about what the impact is to the CADs around the state to run an election unfunded. So he wants the final numbers, and he's going to work with us. And he's a real good driver, because I think when you look at his background, he's a guy that worked his way through college, so he understands working people. He understands what the impact is to business. But that was good to have that discussion with him yesterday on the funding of this. Now, what does this all mean? It means it's going to change the dynamics of that board. We don't know what that specifically means. But if I look at special purpose districts, there's about 14 of the total that really drive the quality of life in this county. And the MUDs in the Woodlands is part of that 14. Rudd Township and some of the other larger surrounding MUDs really drive the quality of life, and we appreciate that. I appreciate the support from the special purpose districts and really helped me get reelected for NCAD. So there's a value. There's a lot of specifics in this bill, but I wanted to really come high level and just give an overview. If we had this in June, it would have been in the original budget. We don't like coming back to the taxing units with supplementals, because each taxing unit has a budgetary process to get an approved budget. And none of us, whether it's privately or in an organization, want a surprise bill showing up and say, hey, you owe me more money. And then you got to either go in reserves or you got to try to find how to fund it. So we don't enjoy that, and we try to keep that to a minimum.
We're going to have to nominate additional members. Is that what it is? And then this will be a special election, and this letter from Tammy says that this is what the estimate of that election is, and if it's more or less, then we'll come back to you on.
Yes, we hope it's not more. We think we have the best estimate. We have a great election official. She's very good at running these things. She's good at estimates, and we've had a number of meetings. Janet Jennings Doyle is trying to get here this morning, but the weather where she's coming from is really impairing her trip. But she's had a number of meetings. We think that's a real good number. We hope we don't come back for an increase. I believe we'll have access to nominate 3 additional candidates for all the taxing units and go through the regular election nomination process. And Jeannie will coordinate that for us in our districts with MCAT and also with the county, how they want to do it and come back with some procedures and all of that.
If you have any questions? Arthur, you want to take 2 minutes and explain to some of the members what the what it really does, what this board does?
Okay, the appraisal district board has really 3 responsibilities. I know people think we have more than that, but we have 3 main responsibilities outlined by statute. 1, we hire and fire the chief appraiser, and the chief appraiser is responsible for the organization. The organization is made up, inclusive of the chief appraiser, of 100 employees. The chief appraiser prepares the budget with her staff, overviewed by the budget committee, and I'm the budget committee chair for MCAD. And the budget committee presents the budget to the MCAD board, which is responsible to approve the budget. Also, in the approval process, we look at making sure the budget's on track. So we kind of operate as an audit, a separate audit process to the budget. And we develop procedures to operate the CAD. And as I'm saying that, Janet Jennings Doyle has just walked in, the chief appraiser. But that's
Thank you,
the
Jen.
primary responsibility of the board. The chief appraiser is responsible for the organization. That means going out, doing the appraisals, taking the homestead exemptions in, to process all of that, and do all the paperwork to get the appraisal agreed by the customer and then presented to the tax collector's office. And also the ARB, which is the group that reviews all the protests. The staff works with that group to make sure we have proper funding, we have proper number of staff, and to execute that whole review process. Now,
And you appoint the people,
now,
and you appoint the people to the ARB.
now historically, the board did nominate the chairman, but that was a couple years ago taken away from us by the state legislature and appointed to a judge that's appointed to be responsible for ARB. I believe because of Senate Bill 2, it will come back to the MCAD board to appoint the chair in 25. The last time we appointed a chair was in 2019. That was taken away from us. Because at the time, the legislators thought there needed to be more space. We do not get involved by statute. We're not allowed to get involved in personal appraisals of anyone's property. We can't talk to people. We have a tax liaison officer, which we hire. That's a board hire. And if Mindy said, look, I got a problem with my property, I'd say, here's Rick Metz's email. Please contact Rick Metz, and he'll take it from there. He will interface with staff, Janet and the staff, and then go through the process from there. So we're very restricted by tax codes and by statute. And that's what we really do. And we're here to look out for our customers. Our taxing units are very important customers, making sure it works, and you guys are getting service. But here's our chief representative, and that Janet's got good staff. She's a change leader, bringing a lot of change to the CAD to modernize the CAD, bring it up into what you expect us to be as we go forward, as this county continues to grow. And we handled 98,000 protests within 14 weeks last year. So from May 16th to certification on July 25th, we had to deal with 98,000 protests. And we think for 24, it'll be up about 110,000 protests.
Based on what's the total amount out there?
Total amount of accounts, what do we have, 370,000 accounts?
So,
Taxpayer accounts, and we're adding more. I think we brought on about another 6,000 new accounts last year. As you read in the paper and all the social media, it's exploding on new developments taking place all over Montgomery County. Whether it's 150 homes in a small development to 6,000 in larger developments. And we're trying to keep up with that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, for the benefit of the new directors, the MUD is not allowed to protest individual accounts, but the MUD is allowed to protest groups. And MUD 40 was the first one that I know of that ever did that. And we did it on the basis of about 50 houses that had their appraisals increased by 30% 3 years in a row. And we settled it out of court. Okay. But we have that possibility, and we have asked our tax collector to give us a indication any year if it over 15% 3 years in a row, if you remember, and you're still doing that. If there's a group of homes that are getting unfair increases consistently, then we go back and say, let's take another look at these.
Share with you, leave you with this. One, as an individual that owns property, if you don't like that appraiser, go protest. That's your right. We don't have any issue with MCAT about that. We encourage people to protest. And the other thing, I would say that we're fortunate in this district with our MUDs to have a tax collector that takes good care of us, watches out for the legislation, has a good relationship with MCAT, and that's very important for all of us. So, Jeannie, appreciate everything you do for us. Janet?
anybody have any questions for Arthur?
No, but we're very
Guys have any
fortunate
Janet, you have, welcome.
that Arthur is also a MUD director.
Good morning. Sorry I'm late. It's icy roads. But just to piggyback off of it, the MUD districts have opportunity to, you're right, to select a group across a category of properties and not individuals. And that is your right. Do keep in mind that our jobs are very, very complex. We're stuck in the middle of a rock and a hard place. I got a chance to talk with Senator Creighton personally yesterday at a meeting that I was invited to by Arthur Breederhoff. Had a good conversation. Him and I are going to work on some bills for this next coming election. We had a really good talk. One of the things we have to keep in mind is that when we appraise homes, of course, we have to follow what we consider is the Texas Property Tax Code. Of course, when the code was written, it didn't write with logic. Logic and law don't mix. And you're absolutely right. We can agree all day long. We'll see it. But unfortunately, we have to appraise property at its fair market value as of January the 1st. And the property and the section 23 of the tax code indicates to us what is considered as market value. Now, of course, we do know that we had a lot of people that decided they wanted to move into Texas, right? We had a lot of Californians rule in, but again, in spite of the logic, right, it don't make logical sense to come pay twice as much for a home. But again, that's what's happening in the market. And then unfortunately, you got logic and you got law. So we have to follow, unfortunately, the law side of it. And that did drive up the market. So we have to follow what the market was doing. Our appraisers are studied by the Texas Controller's Office every 2 years. We call a property value study. And if you can recall, in 2021, prior to me coming aboard, we did fail that property value study in all of our school district jurisdictions. And we failed them because they said that we were too low. They have a very narrow margin of what we have to fall in between, according to the state. Okay, we don't have to agree with it, but we have to abide by it. So you have 95% on the low end and 105 on the top end. Now we came in 21, I believe that we were like at 92% overall. We failed because the state says that our values were too low. Unfortunately, you're right. We could have done a better job in, increasing it as you go along. You start having increases each year. But in 22, we had the hike of the increase. And you're right, that caused a scare because people don't understand that. And when we did that, because we had to try, what happens if you fail one year, you automatically go back into that same study for the next year. So we were in PVS study for the next 3 years. So in 22, we did have to raise the values. We had to change the cost schedules. And so we were able to get us out of a hole in 22. In 23, we're keeping our fingers crossed. So we will be having those findings will be coming out on January the 31st to see where we are. And it's very, very interesting to see where we end up. We are, should I say, we're optimistic that we should pass because again, you're right. We have been raising the values and, when does this thing top off? That's the thing for us. And we too are homeowners. And so unfortunately, I'm in Tomball. We got the $100,000 exemption. That didn't really help me because they jacked it up to 400-something thousand. So how's 100,000 helping me? So, again, that also too in Senate Bill 2 caused the issue because what we're doing, we seem to think that homestead exemptions is the answer to everything, right? And it seems logical. Yes, we want to help the homeowners. Of course, I want help too. But what it does is shifts that burden. Who's going to pay for that? Senate Bill 2 came out and the voters did vote for the $100,000 exemptions for schools. You know what that does to Conroe ISD and Montgomery ISD and Willis and all these others? What happens is they're going to bring in less revenue now because you're talking additional $60,000 per homestead exemption. That's a lot of homes. And so when you look at that, remember they're bringing that revenue in based upon they adopt the tax rate, just like you all, apply a rate to a value, but that value is lower. And then they put the 10.7% compression rate on the ISD's M&O. What you want them to do? So they have to operate just like you have to operate. So what they did, they came in and said, okay, we have money in surplus, so we're gonna provide that difference. Okay. And it caused a strain on us because when we certified, a lot of this year, it was the most challenging legislation year because they were just dumping things on us that we were just finding out about, like certification. We had to certify too at 100,000 exemption plus turn around and certify with the 40,000 exemption. So the state could know what the shortfalls are so that they can cover those funds. But what we didn't realize is the effect it was going to take on our mud districts, our cities, and our college districts, because you're not offering $100,000 exemption. So the less money they pay in the budget, the more you have to pay into the budget. And you should have saw some increase on that. And that is why Conroe ISD is our biggest. And they last year had they paid 31.2% of our budget. This year they dropped down because of the $100,000 exemption. They dropped down to, I think they're almost like they're at 28-something%. Guess who picked that up? You did. And I'm sure legislation didn't think about that. And that's one of the conversations that Brandon Creighton and I had yesterday. And so I'm very optimistic about the future because a lot of times they make these laws and they don't know the effects. And so this is why it's important for chief appraisers to have a relationship with the representatives so that when they do start trying to do this, we can say, okay, but you're not looking at this. And so Senate Bill 2 has been busy. The most interesting thing is that they said it was going to be for 3 years. What happens after that? What are the likelihood is that going to be taken away? You think voters going to want you to take their $100,000 exemption away? Probably not. Where's all this money going to continue to come from? And these shortfalls and all these other entities are going to continue to pay the burden. We got some work to do. And so I'm excited about it. I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm excited to be a part of Montgomery County. But you're right. You have an opportunity to challenge us. Please do so. Because again, it is subjective. Only difference between you and me is that I'm following an educated, orderly set of steps, and you're going off what you feel your property values were personally. That's the only difference between us two. So this is why we encourage you to file your protest. We're still working with 100 staff. Out of that 100, only half of those are registered RPAs. And so we had to do some extensive work on our budget. Thank you so much for supporting our budget. We were working with very, very outdated software when I came in, old process, old procedures, exemptions taking forever to process. I'm sure you may have heard about these things. It has been a nightmare, but I will tell you, thank you so much for approving that budget because we are already working with a new software vendor. We're hoping to go live January 29th. We're all excited about it. But we're keeping our fingers crossed because we know with everything new, sometimes there are glitches. So we're working diligently every day, but the whole goal is to provide as much accurate and efficient information as possible and as timely as possible. And I want to take this year too, to come here more often, educate you more. If anything that's happening out there in legislation, I'll be loved to come and talk to you about it. My follow-ups with Senator Creighton, whatever Ms. Jeannie, you know, want us to do, I want us to be transparent and to have a good working relationship. So that's all I have.
Yeah, just clarify. Walt had a question. I'm not sure I clarified it. These three people, that three positions that are available,
Yes.
will this district be able to nominate someone?
Okay, so the way that works is those three positions that are available, they are elected. So no, you can't nominate someone. That person will, if they're interested in running, they have to meet these certain criterias, okay? And they have to file an application with the county judge. And that's how that works. So when they file an application with a county judge to be on the ballot, now the county judge has the right to object or approve the candidacy. We don't, unfortunately.
The county's conducted that election.
The county did, what we did was, our county elections officer, because it was our first time, the appraisal district, the code says the appraisal district is responsible for the election. Well, we had never had experience in that. So I reached out to Susie Harvey, which is our county elections officer. I met with her and her assistant Stacy. We've been over to the office last week. We just think it's best that we contract through them because they have the experience, especially our first time around. I don't want that mistake to be on my part. And so she gave me an estimate price of how much that election would cost. And she gave us an estimate of the $350,000. Now that is an estimate. It may cost less. We don't know. What if we have a runoff? Hopefully we don't, because if we do, that costs more money. So there's a lot of things that her and I talked about that she educated me on. But that's how it is. They have to, if you know somebody who you would like to have on the board, you have to encourage them to sign up at the county judge's office, and they have a tight deadline. It's 30 days. They have from January the 17th to February the 16th. So if you know if anybody's interested, they need to get in there now.
The county judge has the right to reject an applicant?
Well, they have requirements they have to meet. Is what they're saying is the judge has the responsibility of ensuring that they qualify.
It's
So
the same responsibility as the MUDs have. You have someone who receives the application, and if the application doesn't meet the technical requirements, if it's not signed, if some of the information is not filled in, then it's.
Oh, okay.
It's just in the statute, the county judge, the appraisal district serves that role. But otherwise, what they're doing, one of the reasons I asked the questions is to dovetail in the election cycle. Our recommendation is that the MUDs do the same thing, which is to go join with the county, see that middle
Okay.
there. But their filing period is the same as our filing period. They would be a joint participant in that May election, should we have a contested one.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Jen? Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. Yeah, you're welcome to come anytime. And Arthur, thank you very much for your update.
Here with you guys.
All right, you have a motion and a second to accept. No action. All right, moving on to item 15, grant exemption for taxation for 2024.
All right, you have the draft resolution in your packet. It does reflect the same exemptions as what the district adopted last year. As a reminder, you are authorized to adopt a general residential homestead exemption. have adopted a maximum of 20%. You also have the ability to adopt a over 65 and disabled exemption and stack on top of that residential homestead exemption. And the district has adopted a $10,000 over 65 and disabled exemption as well.
Okay,
I move we adopt the resolution.
I second that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, item 17, SJRA report.
Morning.
Good morning, Chris.
Just a couple of items, well, 3 items, I guess. One, water sewer systems are doing fine with the freeze, just same as during Uri. There's a few more things that broke during Uri, but this go around, we knew what broke, so we fixed it after Uri, so it wouldn't break again. So water and sewer systems are holding up just fine. Staff are doing good. We have 12-hour shifts going on right now. Some staff, based on where they stay or live, that is, they are staying on site for the full 24 hours, but long story short, everything's good. Second item is the wastewater strategic plan. The final report will be in your hands by the end of the month. We're going to get it to Eric and Shelley to post on the Google Drive. It's about 200 pages, give or take. So we don't plan to print any of it, but if anybody would like a copy, a hard copy, let us know or Shelley know, and we'll get you a copy.
It'll be on Drive, on Google Drive.
Yes, by the end of the month.
Okay.
Last thing is, prior to the meeting, I passed out hard copies, about 4 or 5 pages. This is the framework and the general structure for the supplemental agreement for the wastewater plant. We know there's still a lot of conversations, like the next agenda item, that are going to take place. We do expect there to be some modifications to this. But we did want to get it in y'all's hands. You could take a look at it and see just kind of the flow, the structure.
You close those doors.
This agreement is set up just like the 2017 bond agreement that we have, where we had major maintenance. That bond was about 45 million. As you're reading through this bond proposes $35 million in proceeds and about roughly 5 million estimated for issuance cost. It's one of the standard agreements, but wanted to get it in front of y'all, just so y'all can start taking a look at it. At this point, our path forward has proposed a vote in March, April at the latest, to keep us on schedule. But if you have any questions, let us know.
And this is for all the months.
This is all the months. We did miss the deadline getting it to Shelley to be in the packets, but I'll get it to her today so she can post it on the Google Drive. Just a draft for y'all to review. Want y'all to have more enough time to read it, digest it, and then come back with any comments or questions.
Anybody have any questions for Chris? Have you heard any reports of any other the communities out there of any issues with the freeze?
Haven't heard anything just yet. Here's last time after Uri, everybody kind of stepped it up a notch. So
Last night and tonight are we the test for most.
Yeah, that's
Really
right.
freezing that hard yesterday, but last night, today, and tomorrow, I don't think it's gonna get above freezing today, right? Pretty darn close
yeah.
from here north,
Oh, yeah.
roughly. So that'll be the test.
John, you failed to send out a email about telling people to drain their rain barrels that we all had out there. Yeah. And think it's solid as a rock. I just hope it doesn't split. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Item 18, discuss potential funding alternatives related to proposed infrastructure projects.
So, there was a gentle agreement, or a general agreement rather, at the trustees meeting last week to put this agenda item on all the month's agendas. Obviously, last year, we heard a lot of infrastructure that it needs to be repaired. Some of that is obviously in debate on when and how much and all that. But despite all that, whatever comes about, we need to do it whenever that time is, and that has a cost to it. And so the path that we're at least on at the moment, which is the path of least resistance from a logistical standpoint, I think, is for SJRA to sell bonds and then identify a wholesale rate that they would charge the Woodlands MUDs, and then the MUDs would pass that through to the customer. So effectively, payment for that infrastructure renewal would come through your water bill. And I think it was estimated by one of the trustees earlier last year that about 200 million worth of infrastructure renewal is about $100 increase on your water bill on the average customer
A month.
a month. So and so in the 10-year plan, that included about 632 million over a dozen years, a lot of years. This isn't tomorrow. This will happen over time. And so that could, just doing the math, that could evolve into a $300-400 water bill average to the average customer, which in my mind was a little bit problematic. So I started getting questions from a number of different directors and to ask, what are there any other options? Now the money is the money. So whatever it costs, it costs. I think the question at hand is, how do the MUDs pay for that cost? And the consumer is going to pay for it, you know, one way or the other, whether it's in your water bill, and then there's other options, the tax bill. There's two ways to get to the tax bill. And so that's what I think Brian and I wanted to talk a little bit about, was just starting that discussion on what the options are. And it may, again, there's not probably much of a cost savings in any of the options. There may be, I think generally speaking, if SDRA sells bonds, that would be the most cost effective in terms of the rate that they're going to get, and in terms of in the market and their bonding capability versus a bunch of MUDs doing a bunch of different bond apps. I think that would be cumbersome and expensive, particularly on the soft cost, which is the issuance cost, the cost to pay the professionals to put those bond applications together, doing 5 or 6 versus doing 50 or 60 of them 10 times, or 5 times. So that would be maybe another option, is to go to the voters, ask for permission for bonding authorization. But that would essentially cause a scenario where the MUDs would sell their own bonds. There'd probably be 50 or 60 bond issues over a long period of time. And that's pretty cumbersome and probably not very cost effective when it comes to the issuance of bonds. Then there's another tax, and you would see that result. The customer would see the result of that on their tax side, on their tax bill, whether it's escrowed in their mortgage or whether it's just part of your annual taxes at the end of the year. Third option might be to do a rollback election. And that's where you also would have to go to the voters, but you would go to the voters not asking for bond authorization to do bonds, but you would go to the voters for authorization to raise your M&O tax rate up to a level that is sufficient to pay SDRA back the money back for the bonds that they would sell. Same scenario that would go on your tax bill, either in your mortgage or at the end of the year, if you're not escrowing your taxes. So I've not gone through a rollback election. Brian and I talked about it. It is something that would need voter approval. The second and third options would definitely need voter approval, or do nothing on that side of things, enter into the supplemental agreement as it's written, and then that would put it into more of a water and sewer rate situation. So we wanted to start having those conversations with the boards to get folks to understand kind of what the cost of this is, how it relates. I've been getting a lot of responses. What does this mean to the bill? What does this mean to the bill? And so that's kind of a quick summary.
Entering into the supplemental, that's the $100 more a month?
Well, so
Well, keep in mind, so that's a good point. I think the number that Chris just threw out, the first tranche would be about 35 million.
Okay.
So that's only a sixth of $100. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well,
So-
and just real quick, on the $100, I was conferring with Dan, the last time we proposed the wastewater plant itself to 250 million. Average is about $40 a month, 38 to 40. The entire project plan would be about $100 a month to the 500 million or so. But the Freeze and Nichols report showed roughly $40, would you say,
Yeah.
on an average water. And so 1/6 of that roughly is what we're looking at for the first tranche.
I'm sure the residents would rather see one initial shock than they would to see, 40 here, 60 here, at least that's the way I would feel if if it hit me, I'd rather say, okay, how much are my taxes going up or how much is my water bill going up?
So part of the reason for going ahead and starting this discussion now is because the River Authority is asking the MUDs to commit to this first tranche, so to speak. And, you're talking about a bond issue by the River Authority that would just be for what, design and engineering for a facility, but not for the facility itself.
Correct.
A facility that y'all have not committed to. So, what happens if we go and the River Authority issues bonds for a plant and then ultimately the districts say, I don't think we need a plant. That's not a good result for anybody. Or it's going to cost too much. And so we need something that's more cost effective. So it's important before we take the first step down this road that we, have an understanding of, okay, what's this ultimately, going to cost and how are you going to pay for it? And as Eric mentioned, the numbers cumulatively, if you work your way through this, was big numbers. So, and a lot of districts don't have bonding authority, including this one. So it's either add it to your water sewer rates, issue your own water sewer rate bonds, which is not a good option because that's going to be more expensive than the River Authority doing it because they can get economies of scale. Going and having bond elections to get additional bonding authority, and then issue your own bonds, and maybe you get a little bit better rate. Probably not, because you're going to lose more on the issuance expenses for doing multiple bond issues as opposed to one. Or do you try to go to the voters, explain what the situation is, and have a rollback election for your maintenance tax that, based on advice from your financial advisor, will have your FA here in the future, depending on what additional discussions you'll want to have the FA look at, okay, what rate would we need based on the projected ultimate to where we only have to do a single rollback election. So a little bit higher than what you would need, higher than what you'd need for the first tranche, but maybe lower than what you'd need for a later tranche. And visiting initially with the FA, he said, well, we might be able to structure this to where by what you're imposing on the maintenance tax early on, you may be able to stockpile enough to be able to cash pay for all or a portion of a future tranche and reduce the amount of ultimate bonds that the River Authority would have to issue. And I know, but one, as Hartley mentions from time to time, has bought out of River Authority bond issues in the past. So can't say that's ultimately where we end up, but that's part of what this discussion would involve, would be having the FA look at that, see what the rollback rate would need to be, see if there's an opportunity to maybe cash out of some potential bond issues, lower issuance costs overall. But it's a complicated discussion.
What's the timeline on this? We're starting the discussion, but.
Well, so the River Authority would like, but again, we got to have all the MUDs in the boat, and we're not there. We're not close. But the River Authority is hoping that we could get there by March. Whether we do or not, I can't say. I don't think Eric can either. But ideally, we would have an understanding among the districts about how you want to be able to pay for this before we get too far down. Otherwise, it's just going to be an ad hoc hodgepodge. You're going to be doing a rate increase for a part, and then maybe you're trying to go and scramble because the next tranche, the rate increase is too much. You got MUD scrambling to try to go do a bond issue or rollback, and it would be a lot better for the community and for the boards to have a thoughtful, orderly process than an ad hoc kind of chaotic process.
Do all the MUDs need to do the same thing, or?
Ideally, yes.
Okay.
I mean, legally, no. But ideally, yes, because that's going to be more to have to explain to the community if you have MUDs 3, 4, and 5.
Right.
Doing, one rate and then another one doing a maintenance tax. So you've got different water sewer rates versus, some that are doing maintenance tax. But can we get all 10 to do the exact same thing? That may be too ambitious. But at least if everybody's thinking through it and making a decision on the front end, then I think that's the most we can hope for.
But the economy of scale would be better if all 10 did it.
Absolutely.
together.
Absolutely.
And we're talking about replacement of existing infrastructure, which means that it's probably an easier sell also, that everybody just saying, look at, all this stuff is flowing through this one pipe and this needs to be replaced and like I said, mud 1, mud 36, mud 60 doing something different than what mud 47's done.
Yeah, now, I mean, the rates are not going to be, you're not going to have complete, all the rates would not be identical on the tax rate side because the tax rate, if everybody decides, okay, we're going to do the rollback election. Well, how many pennies a particular district needs to generate in order to pay whatever the wholesale rate increment is for the tranche is going to vary depending on what your tax base is, how much you have that's commercial versus residential, because everybody's done the 20% homestead exemption. So, you're offloading different amounts to your commercial, depending on how much commercial versus residential you have. So some district might need, 2 pennies or 3 pennies, just making up numbers. Another one might need 4 or 5. It's the same concept across all the districts that you're getting the revenue that you need to pay for the bonds from maintenance tax. But each district, is it going to be form all the MUDs impose a 3 cent or 5 cent, whatever the number is, rate. But it's too early to say what that would be. We need to have the FA involved, but wanted to start the discussion, get some feedback from MUD so that we can take that back with the FA and start to have them crunch those numbers.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think this might open the door so there's basically 3 different 8 MUDs have the same rates, 2 MUDs don't. I think this would open the door. Water sewer. So I think this might open the door for those other 2 to actually get back in line and make up the difference with whatever they set their tax could be. Right, could be.
I agree that we want to go all the MUDs the same. Option 2 was to continue the way we've always paid for our portion of San Jacinto River Authority capacity. We don't own it. We just buy capacity. We have always used bonds from the district. And we have had numerous bond elections, particularly when we had to refinance. We initially had 14.5% interest and we wanted to go, and we had to go back to the individuals and get them to approve another 19 million for MUD 40. There has not ever been a MUD that failed to pass an approval on bond rate increase in this district, in here. Okay, we only have about less than 6% is ours. So we have enough money right now to handle our portion of a $50 million bond. Okay. Now, historically, we always went through these procedures, and as the cost per app standard family equivalent went up, while we didn't add any, we had to pay the difference of the new cost. That's why we had 4 bonds that we participated in. The last 2 bonds for San Jacinto River Authority that we participated in, we bought out of the first 2. And we have 2 of them remaining, and you'll see it on every one of our monthly reports. We owe San Jacinto River Authority to pay off these bonds, the 2 that we still have interest in. Now, we have enough money to pay those off if we want to. And with bonds, when you take a bond, the first few years, you can't pay them off early. And by the way, correct me if either of you think that I'm not giving the correct information, all right? But as the bonds go out, you can pay off the bond early, and that's what we did. The reason we haven't paid off the other two is because at the time we looked at it, they weren't available to be paid off, okay? You can't call bonds and pay them off early. All right, now, we would probably go and ask for about $20 million to handle $1 billion of improvement by San Jacinto River Authority. Okay. The theory being that the first 30 years, the people paid off the bonds for putting in all the facilities, the capital improvements, and then capital improvements for the next 30 years will be for the next residents for those 30 years. Now, that was a theory. We have many people, particularly in Old Mud 2, that have big homes and big swimming pools and have bills that are, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they're $200 in August. So we're going to say in August, June, July, and August, you're going to have a $300 water bill. Well, that's pretty scary. Now, if you average it, like you have done in the studies that San Jacinto River Authority gave us over the entire Woodlands, then they can say it's only so much a month. Well, that's because in the winter, you don't use any much water for things. Now, my preference would be to go to the people and have them bond. And then the reason, if it's a bond rate and it's a tax rate, that's deductible. If you pay your water and sewer bill, none of that's deductible, okay? None of that's deductible. And this increase is frightening if you want to tell it to the people who pay $200 to $300 water bills in August, September and August, okay? Now, but if we can't get all the MUDs to agree with this, then we probably ought to go with what has been presented by San Jacinto River Authority, with the caveat that a few years back, we knew, first of all, we gave San Jacinto River Authority a special column in their budget of initially $300,000 to replace one well. So if they had to replace a whole well, you could do it. Then we got more problems and we said, we'll add 8 cents to the water and sewer rate for the water rate. And we did. So they went up 8 cents per 1,000 gallon and establish a repair and replacement fund. And that has been very well used by San Jacinto River Authority in doing what they're doing. But the reason we got this big fund that says we can spend over a number of years, $430 million, possibly, is because they're going to abort the current sewer treatment plant and they're going to build a brand new one. That means get more land, et cetera, abort it, that's cost, build a new one, that's cost. And that's capital improvements. And that's what bonds are about, capital improvements. Now, that's my take on it. I would like to just go to the public and say, we want to reestablish bond authority for $20 million bonds and pay our share as they release their bonds. Okay? And by the way, if we do that, we're not charged for their bonds. Have three things that happen. You pay the financial advisor, you pay the attorney, and you pay 3 years of how many years of advance funding?
Well, it depends on the bond issue as far as the capitalized interest.
Capitalized interest. Those are the three things, and they amount to a big portion of the bond, all right?
So
If you got a small bond.
you're gonna have that's why I said this discussion gets complicated, because if you issue your own bonds, you're still gonna have issuance costs,
Yes,
but it's gonna be among all the different districts. So we can have the FA run the numbers, but the goal here is efficiency. So if it's more efficient to have one river authority bond issue, but the MUDs pay in their, pro rata share either through a revenue stream of tax revenue, which would be tax deductible to Hartley's point. That's a good point. Now, of course, the IRS has limited that to 10,000 now. So if you have a higher than 10,000 property tax rate total, you're capped out.
along with your mortgage.
But if you are able to use either maintenance tax, raising your maintenance tax, or debt service, both of those would count as deductible. So that is, a good point to try to avoid paying just with water sewer revenue. But whether or not my gut feel, I'm happy to issue as many, district issues of bonds as y'all want to, y'all and the other districts want to issue, but, we have a, duty to try to do what's most efficient for the MUDs. And we've, always been able to do that over the years. And so if it's more efficient for the river authority to do one, and then the MUDs pay our share through maintenance tax, which you'd have to do rollback elections, then that's what's most cost efficient and would save the residents the most money. If it's, which I doubt, but we can look at for all the MUDs to issue bonds, then, we can do that.
And to clarify, what he just went through is different than what Hartley just mentioned. Hartley was mentioning both tax, but Hartley's mentioning you doing your own bond applications easily. Whereas what he just described was option 3 that I mentioned
The
earlier.
one that's currently proposed is San Jacinto issue the bonds as they need them, up to 430 million.
Well, nothing's really proposed yet. I mean, we're just in,
Not issue the
No, we wouldn't issue ours then. It would go in water sewer rates.
No, maintenance.
maintenance tax.
Hmm?
Maintenance tax. You can still get your tax side
Well,
benefits
yes,
that you
and-
mentioned
And,
without having to do your own bonds.
and if you realize, we have about 4 cents excess. If you'll notice, we went up from 3.5 million to 3,800,000, from 3,500,000 to 3,800,000 this last year, because we're taxing more than we need. That's why I came last year, down our tax rate and said, let's take it down to 5 cents, because I don't think we need another $300,000 at the end of the year, like we're gonna get we did last year, okay? And by the way, at 5%, we still would have had 180,000 excess. But that's a whole nother story, and we already made a decision on that, the tax rate.
so who's going to take the lead on? Are you going to come out with additional information? We're not going to wait till during the month. This will be presented to the various MUDs, or?
Yeah, I mean, the thought is that we would have the financial advisor come in and kind of give you more information on these options with numbers and kind of walk you through what that might look like. And
The
then,
first goal here was just to lay out what the different options were, as
Yeah.
Eric did. And if there's any that particular board said, no, X that, well, then there's no point going through the exercise on whatever option is X by a particular board. So this was more, laying out what the options are, getting, some initial feedback, certainly no decisions, other than if, here's something you go, okay, definitely don't want to do, Y.
Okay.
We take that off the menu. and then go back.
What's the-
And if they get the public to approve 20 million, we only have to use what we want. And you don't just make a bond for 20 million. You make it for, we used to make it for 1 million, 1.5 million, et cetera, et cetera. And you can look at your financials, and if you got money to pay your fair share of San Jacinto River Authority's bond, by having the excess in your tax rate, like we do now, then we don't have to issue a bond.
What's the impact if you do it on the tax side? How much the average customer's tax bill goes up?
Well, that's what the FAA.
Okay. I would want to know that. Because I mean, if it's, I mean, I'm used to air conditioning in the summer, my bill goes up to $350 and then it drops. So I'm used to I mean, that's just how it works in Texas. So I mean, if their tax bill is going to go up a similar amount each month or for at the end of the year, I mean, they're going to see that more than they would if it's over. I just want to know that.
Yeah, on the water sewer side, it would just be whatever your
Yeah.
deal is. It's just gonna, instead of doing this, it's gonna start here and then go
Yeah.
higher and go back down. You're still gonna have that rate, but it's just gonna be magnified.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, item 19, Dan, you have any update on Spring Creek?
No, the committee met a few weeks ago and we kind of got to a point, engineers where they've tweaked the model as much as they think they can tweak it. And the decision was made in the committee to go ahead and have them complete the analysis with the idea that a completed analysis would be something that you could bring to, legislators or governmental officials that you're going to need help with funding and support of the project going on. The engineer is going to be finishing the report, and that should be out here in the next month or so.
Okay. All right, thank you. Item 20, attorney report.
I don't think I have anything that's not on the agenda.
All right, you want to move down to item 21 then?
Yes, 21 items related to the May election. So we'll run a little bit long. There's a memo in your packet there. The punchline is our recommendation to all of our district clients is to go joint with Montgomery County and to authorize notifying the county of our district's intent to participate jointly in the election.
But that cost is not in the budget this year, correct?
Yeah, we got election costs in the budget.
There isn't there?
Yes.
What do we have as the budget number? 20, which probably is not enough. I think y'all,
That's what I meant.
cycle we were just looking at, y'all's last cycle was about 23 for the director election. And it ranges by district depending, it's usually more if you've got a lot more mail out ballots to do. So we have not received the estimate from the county yet. Won't receive that till they know who all the participants are. So it may be a few months down the road. I would say this cycle would be safe around 30 or so. So maybe 10, 15 is not in your budget if we have a contested election. Of course, if we don't have a contested election, it's just a few $1,000s for the paperwork to call and cancel the election. But if we have a contested election, then we're probably looking at 30,000 or so range.
So this is the norm then for the future. We ought to put that in our budget that we're going to be using the county and this is what the average cost is going to be. Okay.
Those are total costs to county plus all the various things.
Yeah, well, that's why we have excess reserve.
All right, do we have a motion and second to accept this?
That's not a action item.
It is.
It is.
Notify the county, the district's intent to participate jointly.
So move.
Second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. 22, supplement agenda in English and Spanish.
This is to call the election. We need a motion on that.
We do or we don't?
We did.
We do. Is there any other language we need to start looking at now besides Spanish?
No, that's based on, percentage of, certain populations within the county. So only Harris County at this point has to do translations also into Chinese and Vietnamese. And that's, considered each census. So.
All right. So we don't have that requirement here. All right. Do I have a motion and a second to accept this?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. General managers report.
I think we've covered most of the items that I had. Just wanted to point out in your packet towards the end, there was, if you didn't know, I think we talked about it prior, but last fall, the trustees completed a resolution, which I read to Jim for his retirement. And Jim has since the reception has written a letter of thank you that we've included in the packet. The only other thing I had was to point out that the new general manager for SGRA started yesterday. And so Ed has mentioned to me previously that there will be a reception so that the Woodlands Mud directors will be able to meet Aubrey at some point here in the future, the near future. So I look forward to meeting him and moving forward.
We got some big shoes to fill. All right, thank you. Board of Trustees report.
Page 76, 77. I don't have anything to add. If you have any questions about the trustees meeting, I'm here to answer.
No, the only thing I have is the Public Education Committee. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, they really have done a wonderful job, and I think our general manager has been fully supportive of that. And you'll notice you're getting a lot more information on the internet than we used to. And thank you very much for your work on that. Appreciate it.
And as a segue, I'd like to kind of pass it over to John too, to give you an update on the PEC.
Please.
Yeah, good morning. Page 64 on the packet there. So we have your communications report. Samples across various platforms of our messaging right now, but I really wanted to kind of breeze across that so we could spend a little bit of time looking at your community survey report results, which is just behind that report there. So this is our report card. This is based off of that strategic plan that we followed since last September, just renewed. The renewal basically is following the same format with our same four main focus areas, telling our story, water quality, water conservation, and value. You will see a stronger thread of infrastructure weaving through those focus areas this year, for obvious reasons. Well, so we followed that strategic plan. We did a survey at the beginning of that plan that helped inform it, construction, and then we run another survey to see how we did. Results are what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. In general, very positive. We improved on every single front. So I'm happy to report that. It's a 20-page survey, or excuse me, 20-question survey. A complete survey and all the results and stats can be found using that QR code at the top right of your survey report. But I just want to highlight a few of the questions to give you a sense of what we found. So where does your drinking water come from? The folks that answered that correctly, that increased 24% past year. How much knowledge do you have regarding Woodlands Water Agency? Those who listed it as a lot or some increased 15% or 9 points. Those that stated none or very little dropped 24%. What's your opinion of Woodlands Water Agency? Our favorability rating increased 9 points or 17%. Our unfavorability rating dropped in half almost, down about 2 points, 2%. That's good. How much knowledge do you have regarding your MUDs? A lot or some. Those answering that way increased 8%. Those answering very little dropped in half, dropped 4 points. What's your opinion of your municipal utility districts? Favorable rating increased 20%. The unfavorable rating decreased 54%. That's good. Yeah. Yeah, big move there. How confident are you that the water from the tap meets regulatory requirements? Extremely confident, rose 10%, 5 points. Not very or not at all, dropped to 32%. That's a combined 6% of respondents reported not very or not at all. So more work to do there, but we did see a significant decline year-over-year. We did a lot of work this year on reformatting our water bill and helping folks understand it, what the various charges are, how we arrive at their charges and so forth. So are the items on your monthly bill clearly explained? Yes, increased 8%, and not very decreased 25%. We added a few new questions this year. Everything else was the same because we wanted apples to apples, right? Year to year, but we did add a couple new ones. Some awareness questions regarding infrastructure. Are you aware that the Woodlands water and sewer infrastructure will need replaced in coming years? A little over half rated very aware or somewhat aware. Got some work to do there. We put one in there on customer support. Did Woodlands Water assist you satisfactorily when contacted for assistance? Over 88% said yes. Those who did have contact with us. So they're doing a great job out there. So again, you can get the complete survey and all the data behind it using that QR code. If you have any questions, let me know. We've had almost 900 respondents, so about 800 actually. So a statistically valid sample size.
What percentage was the people who returned that?
Well, it was the survey mechanism was digital. So we sent it out to our contact list. Okay, so to your question, we sent it out to 22,000. That's the size of our contact list. We had 800 respondents. Now, it was also posted via social media. Can't really track, responded to the email or we responded to social media. They were anonymous responses.
But it's a pretty good percentage is the point. As normal, go out to people and say, we got a survey, we want you to fill it out. You don't have to and send it back. We got a very good percentage as those things go. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, our timing, I think, was a little bit off. We had a really good response. First week, we issued it over 2 weeks. And the first week went gangbusters. And then we ran into Thanksgiving holiday. And I think that reduced the response rate the second week. But still a very good sample size. Very good.
But it means we're reaching our customers. And I think that's wonderful.
I think it's great. I think it's a big improvement. I think it's a big improvement.
Encouraging for sure.
Yeah.
Work to do, but everything's moving in the right direction, at least as far as this metric. There's other ways to gauge it, and we have other ways that we do gauge effectiveness, but this is probably the most definitive one that we have. We know from research that volume of messaging matters too, right? It matters how we message, what we're saying, how we're connecting with folks, but just them hearing from us more matters. And it builds trust when we're communicating with them on good and bad. So to that, your annual report. So you did this last year. It's the next page in your packet, page 69. It's what you sent out last year. It's my recommendation you do it again. We've already got the framework built. Just need to adjust it for 2024. Looking back to 2023. You sent out a 1-pager last year. It cost about $850. Do that. We also sent it digital. I would recommend doing both because we hit about 70% of our accounts, of your accounts, with each one. So to get the, most people, I would recommend doing both, print and digital. And if that is what you want to do, I simply need to communicate with somebody, a lead, whomever, on getting the words right for these various sections, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is what we need to update. I'll plug in the new verbiage, do a little back and forth, make sure everybody's happy, and then we'll get it out in next month's bill.
I want to take a lead on that.
Any volunteers?
I can take the lead, but I don't know.
I never knew how many miles of pipe we had until you.
There we go.
put it
We
up.
can send you the information and then you can coordinate with John.
That's a good.
Only in 140.
Okay.
I remember how many miles of,
John, we have a volunteer, but
Okay.
he'll work with you and each board member to send your comments to Andrew, and then he'll coordinate with John, and we'll move that forward. I think it's a very good tool to send out.
I'll send you an email with the
Okay.
template. Does that work? And then
Yeah, I'll need some help with some of
email
the
back and forth.
bullet points, the accomplishments. Since we
Yeah,
came
we
in-
can help with wordsmithing for sure.
Okay. Maybe you guys can help us, since we came in later in the year.
Yeah.
In 23.
Well, yeah, that,
Oh, last thing, grab one of these on the way out. Gulf Coast Water Conservation Symposium. We get selected 12th annual. Houston Galveston's beside this district, and your fellow directors, Paul Nelson and myself, help coordinate the speakers. It's a day-long event, and the keynote speaker is Dr. Robert Mace from that center.
just hand us down enough cards we can pass them around. Please.
I did get a email from a resident yesterday about our water quality report. That there's some company, EWG, that they're there, right, Harley? That said that our quality is not in compliance. I sent it a copy to Eric. Did you get it?
I looked through it.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a nonprofit organization that, from their reports, doesn't agree with EPA standards, on water quality. So they've set their own. So they say, when they're clear to say, you meet all governmental standards, you just don't meet ours. And we've made up our, that's what it looks like. So
Wow.
you meet all governmental standards for your water.
So is this some company that do you think is trying to sell them something, and then they're saying that?
I don't know if y'all are familiar with them.
It's EWG. Yeah, it's a work group, so it's kind of like, they're just trying to change EPA's health provisions and stuff. We get them quite often because the RO and water softener companies use those to sell their products.
And the levels that they noted that were different than, say, EPA or state levels, are significantly lower, almost zeros compared to what the EPA standards are, that you are meeting. So.
All right, so we're meeting all standards, both state and government, and this company is saying, well, we think it ought to be this. And if you buy my water softener or filtration system, it'll meet that. Okay, that's what I thought. All right, now I'll respond back to them then. I might lose their vote, but what the hell, fail. Anything else? Thanks, John, appreciate it, and that is a very good communication report also, it's in there, so thank you. Item 25, the recess, and there's no need for that today, and that, okay. Item 27, discuss any matters placed on future agenda. Anybody have anything? All right, item 28, do I have a motion to adjourn? I second that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much for coming out this morning.